Before you get ready to move on to week 3 of the fantasy football season, you need to know about the big injuries that happened and which waiver wire pickups you should prioritize. Let's start with the injury report. And the first one is a big one, just when it looked like something finally went right for the New York Giants. Some bad news after the game. Saquon Barkley, star running back, hurt his ankle. Not sure the severity yet. There's some speculation that it might be a high ankle sprain. If that's the case, then that means he could be out for several weeks, but it's too early for me to say anything definitively. You might have to be prepared for life without Saquon if he's your starting running back. The next guy up is Matt Breida. Only touched the ball once this week. I'm not going to go out and say you should pick him up because, again, don't know how injured Barkley is, and I don't know if I really want Breida anyways. Look, this coming week, week 3, the Giants have a short turnaround because they play on Thursday night, and it's against the San Francisco 49ers. So as of right now, I wouldn't touch this backfield until we know more and until this week is over. The first real big injury of week 2 happened early in the first quarter of the Colts-Texans game, and that was quarterback Anthony Richardson, who was on his way potentially to, who knows, maybe historic day. He had already run in 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, and then unfortunately at the end of that second one, hit his head on the turf and had concussion. He didn't return to the game, and of course he'll go through the protocol. Status to be determined as this week goes on. So you might have to look at Gardner Minshew at starting quarterback for the Colts. It goes without saying Minshew does not bring the same kind of upside as Richardson, so I'm not looking at him in fantasy unless you're in a really deep 2-quarterback league. Devontae Adams, also concussion protocol. He was having another productive day, but obviously another guy we need to watch throughout the week in practice. Really bad timing for the Raiders as they were already without Jacoby Myers, who got a concussion in the first game. It's possible if Adams does have to miss week 3, Myers will come back to replace him. If they happen to be without both, I mean, you really want a part of this Raiders offense. The next receiver in line is technically Hunter Renfrow, and there's no way I can even consider him, even without Myers in this game, and even with game script against them where they would have to pass. Hunter Renfrow got 1 target all game. He's just an afterthought in Jimmy Garoppolo's mind. And then a receiver who didn't even make it on the field. Well, I don't think he'll make it on the field in week 2. Amari Cooper playing Monday night, had a groin injury that just popped up on Saturday because they play Monday, a very late week injury. Probably going to have to live without him in week 2. Elijah Moore, a solid start. Look, if this happens to linger, which I will just point this out, he did have off-season surgery in the core muscle area, and a groin injury can linger. So if this is something that does linger for him, Donovan Peoples-Jones does then become somewhat interesting. Another unfortunate running back injury, David Montgomery of the Lions was on his way to another pretty solid day for fantasy, scoring another touchdown, but he left with a thigh injury, did not return. This one, not really sure what his status is, not sure the exact nature of the injury. Always tricky, anything in the leg area for a running back. I'd love to just be able to say it's going to be all Jahmyr Gibbs from here on, but that's not the case. Craig Reynolds did come into the game. He might be somebody who does see some more action with Monty out if Monty does miss time. And then back in Chicago, well, of all the things that are going wrong, let's add injury to it. Darnell Mooney left the game with a knee injury, and that's probably why you saw Chase Claypool actually in the game and caught a touchdown. Have to monitor his status if he's somebody that you were rostering. Odell Beckham left the game with an ankle injury. I can't say I'm shocked here. We know that he's had so many injuries over the last couple of years, and, age might be catching up with him. Age meaning NFL age. What's interesting here, the takeaway is that Rashad Bateman didn't benefit from OBJ being gone. It was Nelson Aguilar who had himself a decent game. 5 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. You gotta wonder where Bateman exactly is on the pecking order. And then finally, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders caught a touchdown but was hit, which, look, if you watch that replay, I don't think there's any question. That was a dirty play. Logan Thomas was down for a while. Obviously, concussion protocol here. He did walk off, so good news there. I don't know if there's anybody who can really replace him at tight end in that offense. Cole Turner got a lot of buzz in the preseason again, but has done nothing so far in the regular season again. So we'll see. But for now, if you did have Logan Thomas, which not a lot of people did, you can probably drop him. All right, let's talk about the top waiver wire pickups heading into week 3. These are the guys you're going to want to prioritize, put the most fab on. And let's start with a guy I had mentioned last week, and it's still available in about half of fantasy leagues. It's not going to be very often you get a guy who's the clear RB1, who's getting all the touches in the backfield, and he's out there in waivers. Zack Moss is available in your league. You have to get him, even if you don't really need him. I said on our live streams, especially Saturday and Sunday before the games, I was feeling a big Zack Moss game. He had all the same elements of the DeAndre Swift breakout game because he was going to get pretty much all the touches in the backfield. He was going against a weak opponent in terms of run defense. I mean, it was there for him, and he took advantage, not to the level of Swift, but hey, 88 rushing yards and a touchdown, and he also caught 4 passes. But the most important thing I want to point out is that no other running back on this roster even touched the ball. He literally got all of the carries on this team other than the quarterbacks, and he's catching passes. Again, there's not many running backs out there in the entire league that are going to do that. Nobody's going to confuse Zack Moss with CMC, but again, getting that workhorse back who, look, this offense has actually not looked that bad, believe it or not. And if Anthony Richardson is out, as I mentioned, this coming week, it's possible Moss might get even more carries. Bottom line, he's out there, drop a hefty amount of fab to get him. And then there's a guy who had been trending downward, and he's still available also in about half of fantasy leagues because after week 1, we just gave up on Sky Moore. We did not see what we wanted in week 1. Well, maybe we saw it in week 2. He was the leading receiver for the Chiefs, 70 yards and a touchdown on 3 catches. Now, a slight word of warning here because he did have 3 catches only on 4 targets, and they did spread the ball around, which is why I'm never going to be fully in on a KC receiver because that's just their offense. Same thing with running backs, but look, he's not going to be a target hog. This is going to be an inconsistent kind of player, which is what we've seen so far in 2 weeks, right? Up and down, and that's fine because you need that volatility. You want the upside. There are very few receivers who are going to give you an amazing performance every single week. Even in the Thursday night shootout, what did A.J. Brown do? Not too much. But we've seen what he can do. Getting those downfield shots, that's what is encouraging here about Sky Moore. That touchdown is nice, but those can come and go. Sky Moore shows some big playability and just the fact that Mahomes actually targeted him. It might be a good time to take a chance on him next week because they face the Bears. Now, if you don't have a lot of fab left to spend this week, it's probably because you spent a good chunk of it picking up Puka Nacua last week. It looks like that was a good idea. Needless to say, he's gone. He's going to be gone in every league, even if he happens to be available. I will say the overlooked in all the Puka hype and in that offense has been Tutu Atwell. I don't think I even mentioned him very strongly last week. So let's talk about the fact that now 2 straight games, not just Puka, but Tutu has been really good. Against the 49ers, 7 catches for 77 yards. Look, this is part of the reason we were nervous about Puka because of the defensive matchup. We weren't sure if that target share was going to be that high. Obviously it was. Same thing with Tutu though. Both of these guys have been productive now for 2 weeks in a row against good teams. He now has 13 catches in 2 games. What's crazy is that at this rate, it looks sustainable because he's been targeted 17 times. Matthew Stafford in 2 games has thrown the ball 93 times. We're looking at vintage Matt Stafford type of numbers. I mean, it's obvious now that last year when he was playing, he wasn't even close to healthy. We knew about the elbow issues, but it must have been worse than we even knew about. This team is just going to pass. They know that's their path to winning is just try to outscore the other team because their defense isn't great anymore. And Cam Akers potentially being gone. They got 1 running back that they can realistically use. This might actually hold up. So Tutu Atwell looks like a guy you definitely want to add, especially if you missed out on Puka. And then another team that's been a surprising source of offense is the Green Bay Packers. Jaden Reed, I was big on as a stash before week 1, a guy who I thought might have a nice debut. He was okay, but then he left with injury, didn't get to really show too much. Romeo Doubs stole the show by catching 2 touchdowns. So just when we're all on Romeo Doubs in week 2, guess who steps up with 2 touchdowns? Jaden Reed. I'll keep saying it, touchdowns come and go. You can't really predict who's going to get them. But the reason you've got to like Jaden Reed is not the 2 scores, it's the targets. He was targeted 8 times, and that was a team high. Reed is very athletic. He's going to be used a lot. He's going to be one of the primary targets in this offense. Even if Christian Watson comes back ever, Jaden Reed will still be a good player to have on your roster. I will warn against potentially starting him next week because getting the New Orleans Saints is not a great matchup for receivers, but definitely somebody worth adding. Another rookie receiver who stood out in week 2 was Marvin Mims. Again, this whole Denver offense just looked the same in week one. They didn't do much. Russell Wilson's depth of target was among the lowest of all quarterbacks. Mims was not involved. So just when you think, well, Jerry Jeudy's back in week two, they're definitely not going to throw to Mims, they flipped the script on us. We actually saw a glimmer of old Russ. He was throwing the ball down the field, and it worked. Now, I don't know if I can say Sean Payton has fully worked his magic. I mean, Denver is now 0-2, but they put up points, and the passing game was effective. Mims only caught 2 balls. It just so happens one was a 60-yard touchdown, and the other was a 53-yard catch. He might be kind of a one-trick pony at this rate, but that's the kind of trick you like to have on your fantasy roster if he can have those huge weeks. You definitely wish you would have had him in your lineup this week. Nobody did, and that's fine. Get that. He's still the number 3 receiver there. He's a rookie. We didn't think we would even see any of this from Russ, but there it is. At least we know it's still there somewhere. And then one more rookie receiver who stood out in week 2 was Tank Dell. Now, Tank got a lot of buzz in the preseason, was talked about being CJ Stroud's favorite target. Didn't see any of that in the opener, but now we see it. There's definitely an opening here because Noah Brown is on IR. You think, okay, fine, that opens up some targets for Tank. But here's the thing with Houston now. It looks like they're really just going to let CJ Stroud just throw it. They're going to be the next Matt Stafford or Deshaun Watson, I guess. They're not worried about the running game, or maybe they just know they can't run the ball. So Tank was targeted 10 times, leading the team, and still we saw guys like Nico Collins have a huge game again, and Robert Woods also have a big game. But Tank went for 7 catches, 72 yards, and had a touchdown. That's enough to make him a strong waiver wire ad for sure. But again, it's the fact that this offense is throwing it so much. That's definitely something that wasn't expected this soon in the season. That's why if you're looking for a quarterback, I'm going to go ahead and say CJ Stroud is it this week. After an impressive debut, he went for 384 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 2. I talked about Stafford's crazy number of attempts so far this season. Stroud is right behind him. He's thrown the ball 91 times in 2 games. Through sheer volume alone, he's going to be fantasy relevant. And that kind of hodgepodge of young and old receivers on that roster, it's working. In week 3, Houston's going to play the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Look, I know the Jacksonville offense looked pretty bad this past week, but they're generally a team that should put up points. Not a great defense. It could be a chance for another big game from Stroud. If you need a tight end heading into week 3, I'm going to go a little bit off the radar. A guy that hasn't been talked about much. I really like Cade Otton. First, I like the fact that he was 3rd on the team in targets this past game. He caught 6 balls for 41 yards. But what I really like is that Tampa's going to play Philadelphia next week. So far, it looks like Philly might be the kind of team that you want to stream a tight end against. In week 1, they let Hunter Henry go for 56 yards and a touchdown. In week 2, TJ Hawkinson, 7 catches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know they've got some injuries on that defense, but this seems to be more of a schematic thing and just letting tight ends roam free across the middle of the field. Either way, Otton's getting targets. He's got a great matchup. He's somebody you should prioritize if you need a tight end. And then deep league special. I know some of these players aren't out there in your super competitive leagues. Why not look for a running back like Latavius Murray? Now again, I don't want to just focus on touchdowns, but in this case, you're looking for a deep option at running back. You got to look for something. It's not going to be volume because all those players are gone. What I like is not just that Murray happened to score a touchdown in week 2 because so did Damian Harris, but here's the thing. When they got in the red zone, it was almost exclusively Latavius Murray. He scored once, but he also had multiple carries on another drive and catches in the red zone. James Cook owners, I know how you feel. See him go for 123 yards on the ground and not score while both the other backup running backs are getting paid dirt. I think we have to get used to it. That's just how this offense is going to operate. So Murray, wouldn't surprise me. He gets several touchdowns this year. He is also doing the thing that Damian Harris isn't doing and won't do, is catch passes. And obviously, if Cook or Harris do go down, Murray's going to get a boost in value, so a smart player to stash. And then I'll end with a repeat from last week. Advocated for Josh Reynolds as the clear number 2 receiver in Detroit. I'm going to push a little harder this time because he had another nice game, caught 2 touchdowns, but also 66 yards on 5 catches. He's getting that regular volume. He's getting those nice quality targets that you like to see, not just some short dump offs. I've never been huge on Josh Reynolds because he never really put it together when he was with the Rams, and he's just been okay since then. But Look, he's stepping up this year. This offense clearly looks pretty good, especially in the passing game. Reynolds right now looks like a strong add and even potentially a flex play in a 12-team league. Those guys were some of the most pleasant surprises of the early part of the season. These guys, not so much. Which players should you be panicking about?